Hey there folks, so I just wanted to show a quick tip on how you can use reference images inside 3ds Max. So if you were going to be making a shape like this violin, for example, if you were doing this without a reference image, it would be pretty tough to do that. You know, to get the shape right and so on would be pretty difficult within 3ds Max. So, you know, a really helpful thing to do is just to bring in a reference image like this one, so that you can draw around it and make sure you are, creating the right shape. So the way that we can do that, I'll just show you briefly. But basically, first of all, let's start off by downloading a image. So, you can just go to Google Images, type in whatever it is you're looking for. Obviously, you could create an image, draw it yourself and scan it in, or draw it in Photoshop and use that, or use a photograph. But yeah, for this one, for example, I'll just use something like this. Just be aware, when you download the image, make sure that it is a JPEG file or another file that 3ds Max can work with, like a PNG should be fine. But I've noticed recently a lot of them are now these WebP files, and 3ds Max doesn't currently read those. So unless you can convert that in another package, that one won't work inside 3ds Max. But let's find another one like this one, for example. And we'll go to File, Save As. I'm just right-clicking on the image here, and I'm going to Save As, and then I am saving that. And that is a JPEG file, so that's fine. So we'll save that image out. And then what you want to do once you've downloaded the image, you can, if you want to do anything in Photoshop, let's say the violin was slightly off-center, maybe I need to straighten it up. Like, for example, I noticed this one was kind of slightly an angle. I would probably bring that into Photoshop and just straighten it up before I brought it into 3ds Max. But the one I downloaded I think looks fine, so I'll bring it straight into 3ds Max. So the first thing I want to do though is I want to move it over to the appropriate folder in the project that we're working in. So if you remember, inside my 3ds Max project, this is my 3ds Max project with all these folders. The images go inside the Scene Assets folder, and then inside Images. So here we go. I've actually already kind of copied it over, but what I would do now is I kind of drag it over, and I have it in there so that when I load it up in 3ds Max, it's in the right place. So now what I'll do, I'll go into 3ds Max, and let's delete the old one, and I'll just move this off to the side for now. And what I would do is I'll create a simple plane to use as my image plane. So I'm going to do this in the orthographic view. So I'll go to the front, and I will go to the plane, and I will create a new plane there. And if yours has segments, like when you first create the plane, it'll probably look like this. You can remove those if you want, because you don't need it to have any particular segments. It can just be one piece like this. So now we're going to apply material to this object. So if you remember, to bring up the material editor, we press M on the keyboard. Here we go, and this is one I made earlier, but I'll just delete that for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a brand new material to apply to my image plane. So I'll double click on the physical material here, and this is my new material. And now I'm going to plug in a texture to it. So I come over to the side, and I go to the base color, and there's the color we can pick. But if you want to apply an image, we click on this little box next to that. So I click here, and it's the bitmap one that we want to look up, we want to use. So bitmap is just another word for an image file that uses pixels, basically. So if I double click on bitmap, I can then make sure I look in the right place. So I'll click here under Scenes, go here, and then I'll go to Scene Assets, and then Images, and I'll select the correct image, and I'll click on Open. And that will then bring up the image to that material. Now you'll notice that it's not yet appearing on the actual object here, and that's because I haven't actually applied this material to this object. So the way that I do that is I make sure that the plane is still selected, like this, and I will then right-click on the material and go Assign Material to Selection. There we go, and now you will see that will appear there. Cool, so now we have our reference image, and you'll notice it doesn't necessarily appear the right proportions. So depending on what size I drew my original rectangle, you may find that your image is kind of squashed or stretched. So you may have to realign this to get that to be looking the correct size. You may want to move it back a little bit. So if I go to the perspective view, I can move it back in the viewport. And now I can basically start creating my object and using this as the reference. Now, one thing to be aware of, if you are using some of the the polygon tools, like let's say the box. I mean, for this one, I'd probably start off using the line tool, in fact, and I'd kind of draw around the edge with the line tool. I'd then extrude that. But if you were using the box, you'll see that annoyingly, I can't see through the box to actually see the reference. And if I go to wireframe mode, unfortunately, that happens for both the box and also the reference image. So that kind of doesn't really help. But what we can do, there's a little shortcut we can use here. So if I have the box selected and I press Alt and X together, that turns the box into kind of X-ray mode. And now I can adjust the box. I can also see the reference image. And to set it back again, I'll just press Alt and X again. So once I've finished doing everything I want with this, I'll press Alt and X again, and it'll turn it back into normal mode. So that's kind of done on a per object basis. So if I select this object and I press Alt X, that will turn that into X-ray mode, and I can turn them all into X-ray mode if I like, and I can turn them all back again by selecting them and pressing Alt X. There we go. So yeah, that's my kind of tip on how you can use reference images. One other thing I wanted to say about how you can get them to line up or get the ratio completely correct, if you want to be very accurate, is you can go into Photoshop, and with your image selected, you can look at the image size. And let's say this is 31.25 by 50.1. Let's just copy that value. And here, when we go to the width, we could paste that into there, and then we'll get the height, and we'll paste that in there. Oops. And now that is the correct ratio. And now if we just use the scale tool and we make sure that we scale it uniformly, like not along one edge like that, then we will know that that is now the correct ratio. So that's one way of doing that. Another way of doing it would be to just make sure that this is a square image. So if I was to go to canvas size, and I was to set this to be the height and the width to be exactly the same, like pick the longest one and then copy it over to the shortest one and click on OK. Now, because this is a square, I can very easily, as long as I make my reference image a square, the reference plane square, so equal length and width, then I'll know that the ratio will be correct as well. Great, so I hope that was helpful.